Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on this on-demand webinar. I'm really excited today to have with us Jeremy Davies from IWAVE. And I wish, as an executive director for many, many years, that I had learned what I've learned just working with IWAVE. They're a great partner with Sharity, and we use this tool to do all of our wealth screening and donor segmentation for our clients. So today we're going to be really talking about how you use wealth screening tools and why I really believe every nonprofit should take the time and make sure that they have a better understanding of who's in their donor base and how they should be approaching them. So with that, welcome, Jeremy. Thank you so much for being with me today.
You are most welcome, Carol. Happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction.
Oh, well, thank you. So this is what we're going to be covering today. I'm really excited. But let's just start off and tell everybody a little bit about IWAVE and why it's a little bit different, because I think people have heard about different wealth engines and different screening tools, but I really love IWAVE and what you all bring to the table. Mainly because when I go in and work with clients and they've had their donor databases screened with other tools, it's confusing and difficult to use. So tell us a little bit about IWAVE.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing we need to point out is that we're a bunch of friendly Canadians, so we take that whole different approach to the table. But second, when it comes to the data, I mean, we're an all-in-one stop shop. So you're going to get the information about the individuals you're looking for, but any foundations they're connected to, the companies they're connected to, and really want to cover off that whole new, fresh approach. We've used to partner with other companies for screening, but have taken it upon ourselves to do that in the last number of years, and I think it's really made a difference.
Great. And tell us a little bit about the different types of tools that you pull in and how that actually works to identify how much wealth someone has and what kind of prospect they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So what comes into play is really three key points. Everybody wants to know about the ultimate factor, which is dollars. But someone can be wealthy, of course, and really have no intention of giving to your organization or no real affinity to your cause. So we look at three key points. One, of course, is capacity and the overall dollars that someone can bring to the table over a 5-year term. But we also look to their past giving history to see if they, in fact, have an affinity to the cause. So if they've given to other arts organizations in the past, or perhaps another hospital, or who knows, right? Maybe their alma mater, so they have an affinity to education. So we really take that into account. And then the last factor is propensity. So do they have a history of giving? Do they sit on a board? When it comes to dollar value, do they give monthly gifts, or do they give great big giant annual gifts? It really makes a difference. So those three key factors come into play when we're taking a look at someone's file.
And it's interesting because I will tell you probably the number one request that I get from nonprofits is help me find some new donors. And I look at their database and it has, 85% of their donors are lapsed and they haven't given a gift in 12 to 24 months. Yeah. And there's so much opportunity just to go back if they understood who we'd already given and understand that capacity. For the nonprofits that don't really haven't done this sort of thing before, can you maybe take a second and just explain how you look at what capacity is? And this is a great tool. Talk to me about a little bit, we talked about the propensity, affinity, and capacity, but they spend time sometimes identifying someone and saying, oh, I want this person to give me because I heard that they gave $1 million to this other organization.
Right.
And they overlook someone who may have given them $100, who could give them $1 million.
Definitely, because one of the things that we try to identify on that last slide was the 4 kind of pillars that we look to in our screenings, and one of those things is whether or not they're a hidden gem. And what we mean by that is that you could very well have those people that are, in fact, giving $100, maybe monthly, maybe it's just annually, but those same people we could determine have a history of giving much higher dollar amounts to other organizations in the community, or perhaps it's a national organization across the other side of the country that you've never thought to look into. But the system can identify those, and we show them as being someone that has a history of giving to you, but not a lot. But in the system, they have a history of giving a whole bunch more money to these other orgs. So we consider them to be a hidden gem, right? So those definitely could be sitting in the database just as sleepers that you just haven't had the chance to talk to, because I mean, let's face it, your MGO could be spending a lot of time with some of those bigger donors, right? And not have the time to look at somebody that has a history of giving $100 because they overlook them. They say there's no opportunity there, right? So they are going to go after those bigger fish.
Well, and the other two categories on here, the distinguished philanthropists and your champions, a lot of times they don't even know that that's who they should be really, again, pulling out and working with differently than they do the rest of their donor database.
Absolutely. Yeah, those champions are the people in the system that we see are giving lots of money to you, but are also kind of not giving elsewhere. Right, so you give us a look at their history within the organization, and they're giving you thousands of dollars, but the system can't really find a lot of information on those people. So those are the people we call your champions. But those distinguished philanthropists, those are the ones that have tons of information in the system and have a good history of giving to you. Yeah, but that last section over on the bottom left, those are the ones the MGOs really probably should be skipping over, because not only are they not giving a lot to you, but the system can't find anything about them elsewhere either. So yeah, that's really all four pillars, and what IWAVE is really good at.
Well, and we often talk to our clients about the difference between wealth and income. And there are, two attorneys here in town, and I know one is fairly visible in his giving, and the other one they know has a lot of wealth, and everybody wants to go after this other one. But I've not seen any place where he's given cash in a philanthropic way. It's been more of a marketing.
Maybe some pro bono work.
Yeah. Pro bono work or marketing and things like that. And I always say, let's not waste your time. Or again, the affinity thing. They give to the arts and you're an animal cause.
Yeah.
May not be a match there. So quit chasing after people that you don't need to be chasing after.
Exactly.
Now, these IWAVE insights are so incredibly helpful in being able to really understand who's in your donor database and who you need to be targeting. But before you can get to this place, I have a lot of boards, and even mainly the boards, but a lot of times even some executive directors that are really anxious about pulling this information. What do you say to somebody if they, would love to know this, but are really anxious about handing over their donor base and having, all this data mined?
Yeah, it can be a scary proposition, but IWAVE goes through the highest security protocols. Your data is not being shared with any other organizations. Most of the data that we find is all out there in the public to be found. We just happen to have it all in one spot. Yeah, and you know what? Security is a good thing to be worried about nowadays. There's breaches all the time. You hear it in the news, but I can assure anyone that has questions about it, they can go to IWAVE's website. Our security policies and our privacy policies are all online, very visible, and we're very open to chatting about it. So we do take that to a higher degree here.
And how do you alleviate the concerns that donors might be upset if they found out that you had all of this information?
It's not something that comes up a lot. Actually, oddly enough, it did come up in a conversation I was having with a client yesterday in California. And their solution was, you know what, we only tell the donors if they ask. But with things like GDPR coming available in the UK, sometimes donors do want to know. But you can be very straightforward. You can present them the list of all the information that you found. It's printable into a PDF format. But honestly, it really comes down to what each organization does. Some very forthcoming, some not so much.
Well, and I always tell my clients that, you know, my university has stalked me online forever. They know every single place that I've lived. I've never sent them a change of address. They
Yep.
somehow have figured out my cell phone number. They text me. Even when I start using a different email address, they manage to figure that out. So it's not like anybody who's ever gone to university isn't having this done anyway.
No, and sometimes people, especially nowadays with social media being so prevalent, some people don't even realize what they're putting out there on themselves. You know,
Yeah.
and if your Facebook profile is public and you tell your Facebook profile that you went to such and such a school, you work at such and such an organization, that stuff is easily found. So if your LinkedIn profile is public, you know, those things come into account, and yeah, your university I would imagine is using that information.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they do. So, you know, let's back up just a little bit and talk about, now that you've gotten past, you know, the fear of actually screening, and you understand kind of how you can pull people out. How do nonprofits use something like IWAVE, a tool, to be able to segment donors, and why would you want to?
Yeah, so in consultation with a lot of clients, a lot of them are using those insights to drill down. So the first thing that you'll notice if you do an IWAVE screening is that we have a classification of numbers 1 through 4, 4 being the best. The first thing they'll do is bring back all the people that are rated a 4. Then they might use dollar values. Then they might use, okay, well, who's a hidden gem, right? Who should I approach first? And that segmentation is so easily done. You can do it within IWAVE where the results are delivered, or you can export it if you're someone that really likes data. I talk to those people all the time and doesn't mind kicking their way around a spreadsheet. I can't do that, but lots of people can. And you can export the data right into a spreadsheet and do it that way too. There's no harm in doing that, and it's very easy. The data, you know, once you upload it to IWAVE, we're capable of doing over 100,000 screens a day. So typically your results are delivered that same day. It's very fast and very efficient.
Yeah. And I happen to be one of those people that I love being able to download it into an Excel spreadsheet and sort it, and even break it into different individual spreadsheets based on categories, like you would if you were doing a donor matrix, giving matrix. Makes it so much easier sometimes to then go in and add some comments, or have, you know, board members or senior staff review those names and that different segments. So
and there's so many columns available, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can break it down. Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is really interesting is that it gives how the person's wealth is calculated in terms of, and I know I'm jumping around on the PowerPoint a little bit, but that there's land, you know, there's, you know, different types of ways that you can look at their wealth, and you pull that from so many different sources. That really kind of gives, and now you have the, you know, whether or not they have a plane or a boat, which gives you, you know, disposable income that they may have. So there's lots of different, like you said, there's tons of different screens. Which line do you find is the most valuable?
Yeah, you know what? I like, and you know what? It turns up the most is real estate. It's tried and true. It is typically the way that capacity is probably, I'd be pulling a number out of a hat, but I would guess that 70 to 80% of the 4s on a sheet come back to real estate a lot of the time. And one of the things we've done is actually tried to make that more efficient than it has been in the past. We have some great staff. The staff here has grown by 3 times in the last couple of years. One of the people on staff in the IT team is an absolute wizard. She went to school to study nuclear physics or something like that. Like she's smart as a whip, and she figured out our new real estate ratio. And the reason she did that is to really try to equalize out what someone's real estate might be valued at in New York versus California versus Kansas, right? Because $100,000 buys you a completely different property in each one of those places. So we wanted to make sure that the surrounding area is taken into account rather than just the sole value of that one property itself. And I think that has made a huge difference when it comes to capacity numbers.
Great. And I know a lot of nonprofits look at that and don't realize that, you know, that real estate holdings, they think, well, that's not liquid cash, but you know, especially in this day and age, that there's a lot of money to be had in real estate.
Yeah. So personally, I bought my house 10 years ago and it's more than doubled in price. And you know, we put new siding on it, so it's like there's quite a difference, and I know that that's the case around North America, so it really does come into play.
So let me ask you another question about wealth screening, and that is that there's a lot of donor advised funds out there. A lot of people hold their money in trusts, or you might find that they hold them in a spouse's name instead of their name. Talk a little bit about how people can actually go in and kind of find some of that information.
Yeah, certainly. So one of the neat things about IWAVE is our donations database, and totally unique in the marketplace because of the way we store our annual reports, so that you can fact check the information. But donor advised funds are showing up on those annual reports more and more, whether it's in its short form of DAF or fully written out. And what's funny to me is how they seemingly were originally created to be a way to hide said money, but more and more routinely I'm seeing family names attached to those DAFs. So that's showing up on annual reports and has led to the finding of additional properties. Speaking of spouses, I mean, one of the things that the screening does is if you put in the name of an individual but don't have their spouse's name, and you give the address for the fact that you know where that one individual lives, if we do find a name match to that address and there's a spouse on the real estate record, then the system infers that that is indeed the spouse, and then we'll go on to find even more information about that spouse too, in case they do have a DAF or they do like to give money on their own. You see that all the time where one individual, even though they're married, gives to maybe an alma mater or gives to a cause that they believe in that the spouse doesn't. I mean, that's intermarital affairs, but it's more common than you think.
You can actually, the nice thing is, as you're starting to search, you can, and you see something like that, you can add it to a profile. And so you build this profile of this person. So it's not just, you know, a lot of times I see, again, clients that get these wealth screens and there's no ability to then go in and kind of dig through. And then you start to see, well, there's this trust here. And guess what? Now there's 3 or 4 other properties that they own with a sibling or with, you know, someone else. And then you start connecting the dots and you can actually pull it all into one donor profile and you end up with a much, much more robust picture.
If I had $1 for every additional property I've found using IWAVE, it's ridiculous how many are in there. Especially for some of our Canadian clients that are looking for properties owned in Florida or in Arizona or in California. Those ones pop up too. Sometimes looking up an address rather than looking up a name will provide you with a hit that you didn't know was there. Absolutely. The ability to add records into a profile, not just actually something new. I don't know if you've even noticed this, but the ability to add new records into a profile that may not exist in IWAVE, but say you know that so-and-so gave $1 million to such and such an organization, you can add that into that profile and have it account for part of their score now. So it's great.
That's great for donors that you might know that give anonymously, which many major donors are moving to anonymous gifts because they just get hounded by nonprofits when they do put their name out there. And if anybody who deals with someone who's a multimillionaire, you go and you do the ask, and then they make the decision: is it going to come from their company? Is it going to come from a personal foundation? Is it going to come from their personal bank account? And you just never quite know how that money is going to funnel. But one of the great things that you also have now is corporate screenings, and I use it all the time, foundation screenings.
Yeah, it's a total game changer, unique in the marketplace. Nobody else is doing it. To have the ability to upload a batch of companies or foundations and get those same similar scores for capacity, propensity, affinity that you do for individuals. Yeah, so trying to come up with an average donation for that organization, what you should be asking for going forward.
Which is huge for so many nonprofits that have not gotten into the corporate giving, and they want to put their foot out there and start doing that. And a lot of times, honestly, a lot of times the affinity is just not there. And I was telling a client this morning, I understand that you do these two things that they're talking about, but they're talking about doing this other thing, and you are not a match. And but it's also what potentially could we get, and so it does make a big difference. And then the other thing I love about it is being able to go into the foundation section and search by topic. And so I can put my mission in there or what I'm trying to fund, and it'll come up with all kinds of potential foundations that I could go after.
Yeah, and you know what? If you did have that situation where you did find out that so-and-so is not going to give to you, well, that just made an enormous amount of time for you to go investigate the one that will. So a good and a bad out of that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge piece of what this is. It's about being more efficient, getting a higher return on your investment. But I also think this corporation search is really a game changer, because again, they give in so many different ways too, and everybody seems to think that they give that companies give through their foundation only, when in fact that's actually the smallest amount of money that they typically give.
We do have the ability to search for in-kind gifts and sponsorship gifts as well through the donations database. So if you're holding a golf tournament, why not look for in-kind or sponsorship dollars? Because what if that organization on an annual report somewhere listed that they were a sponsor for a hole-in-one, a hole at a golf tournament, right? Somebody's got to underwrite the insurance for that car. So that stuff shows up all the time.
Yeah, and actually that's a good point, because I know we have one of the largest timeshare companies in the world based here out of Central Florida, where I'm at. And they give away vacation weeks all over the world. And, those are extremely valuable, especially now when things are starting to open back up and everybody wants to take a vacation. A week in wherever is pretty valuable. So all of those things are really wonderful to have some kind of idea on, not just, what you can ask for, but in what way you can ask for it. So
agreed.
Yeah, really, really wonderful. So year-end giving is coming up, and holidays, direct mail is something that happens, year-round. And I know I have one client that sends mass mailing out to everybody. Everybody gets the same mailing. A lot of my clients do that. Everybody gets the same thing. And then some of them have started to use the well screen to change. And based on these, again, different segments, have started sending different things out, or not sending anything at all because it's not really worth it and there's not going to be an ROI on that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you can use this tool to really maximize any sort of campaign that you might be doing for your annual fund like that?
Yeah, so obviously when it comes to screening, most of the time you are screening the the people that are currently giving to the organization. But another neat thing about IWAVE that separates us from the rest is the list building capabilities. So if you were to create a list of people that live in a specific zip code of the city, you could identify homes above a certain value and see who the owners of those individuals are. You can literally search for zip code, single family home, value of blank and higher, right? And be able to export that list directly into a spreadsheet to be able to manipulate onto mailing addresses. Yeah, so it's just another option come holiday time.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's a really much more effective donor acquisition. And if you own a subscription to IWAVE, I mean, that in and of itself could pay for itself pretty quickly. Again, going in and doing the well-screened segmenting, but then adding a certain target neighborhood in your community where you really want to see if you can't go in and get some donors out of that group.
And you know what, if you had the extra time and the extra screens available, you could, if you had the time, export that list from the CoreLogic database and screen it ahead of time to see if any of those names have an affinity, what we were looking for earlier. Because if they have an affinity, then obviously they're a little more valuable than the rest of the people, just because they live in an expensive area, as we were speaking to earlier, doesn't mean they're going to give to your cause. So, but if they have a history of giving to the arts and you're an arts organization, well, that's an in. So you're better off sending that to them.
Yeah. Right. And, you know, a lot of nonprofits don't think that screening, they think it's too expensive. But the reality is when you start looking at just a few hours of staff time that you've just saved, that, you know, again, determining who it is in your community that not only could give to your organization, has the wealth, but then has that affinity. It really, especially if you're a smaller organization that doesn't have a ton of development people, this could be, you know, a real game changer.
Could totally be a game changer. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, you know, with our ability to process so many screens a day, you could, every subscription comes with, above our professional level, comes with screens nowadays. So you have that option as part of your subscription. And yeah, if you're a one-person shop, then, or even a couple-person shop, then absolutely spending the extra little bit of time to fill out that initial spreadsheet could turn into some valuable time saved over the course of many months or a year-long subscription. Definitely.
Right. So let's talk about, because capital campaigns is on this slide. So let's talk about capital campaigns for just a second, because you know, somewhere between 50 to 60% of capital campaigns in the United States do not meet goal, which can be really devastating to the reputation of an organization with those larger donors if you don't hit your goal. And probably the number one reason they don't hit goal is because they don't have enough cultivated donors to hit the number before they launch. And they seem to think that somehow or another they're going to just find these donors as they're going along. So using this to screen your donor database prior to launching a capital campaign to make sure you have at least 60% already cultivated in giving is really critically important.
Absolutely, totally agree. You can only hit up the same donor so many times before they just can't give anymore. So why not be able to look for capital campaign donors out of the community, for instance? So you again, going back to our donations database, I sound like I'm beating the same drum, but in the donations database, you do have the ability to segment by capital campaign donors. So here's a list of people that already have done so. And again, maybe they don't have an affinity, but that is something that we can determine going forward, and hopefully be able to meet those goals. Because you know what, I didn't know that number was so high until you said it.
Yeah.
it seems I talk to the people that are successful. It would seem, I don't
Well,
know,
you know,
but yeah, that's higher than I certainly would want it to be. If I was a small elementary school and was looking to build a new wing, then that would be devastating to not be able to meet that goal. So yeah, we would definitely want to be able to help there.
yeah, and it really is something that, you know, again, 50% are successful, but most of them do end up having to get some sort of loan or mortgage or something like that because they didn't hit the full goal, or there's and it's usually because they didn't launch with enough planned, you know, donors that they had already identified that they knew would be there and be ready and be able to make that lift to get them to
Yeah,
where they need to go.
yeah.
Um, so, you know, I think, and let's talk just a second too about plan giving, because one of the things I do like is that your screen identifies who might be good for a planned gift.
So at the moment, it simply looks for whether or not there's a history of that person or couple having some indication of a planned gift in the system, whether that's the fact that we found a planned gift in their name through an annual report, or perhaps they have a trust set up and a piece of real estate, or they have a foundation set up in the name of a trust. So those things we try to identify. But excitingly, there are some new innovations coming up to help move that forward, if you will. I haven't seen it yet myself. It's still in development here at IWAVE, but with the move to our new platform last year, it's allowed for a lot of innovation, as any clients watching would have seen in the last little while. And this is going to be another one of those things, so that in screenings and building profiles going forward, plan giving is something we're going to focus on this fall.
It's and that's really great news, because you know that green circle there, that the wealth transfer is coming, and a lot of people are giving a portion of it, if not all of it, away.
Yeah.
And if your nonprofit is not set up and does not have a planned giving strategy that's really well formed, and that your board is behind, you are going to be left behind if you don't have some sort of idea of how you're going to be doing that and accomplish it.
It's such a morbid thing to talk about, but we all die someday, right? And it's that green bubble is right. The baby boomers, that huge segmentation of the population. Yeah, we're all getting up there. Yeah.
Well, I built a kennel one time at a shelter, and so that people could bring their pets with them. And within 2 years, we had enough planned gifts already assigned that were going to be coming in the future that it would have funded it forever once those people passed. And we really hadn't pushed planned giving, but it was people who did not have children, who loved their pets, and they really felt strongly about the organization and what we had built. So, you know, if you're doing any kind of campaign, making sure that you have that planned giving. A lot of times when you're doing a capital campaign or a major gifts campaign, people forget this piece of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such a small percentage of nonprofits that have planned giving. So that's an exciting, I mean, you guys are just, you know, every time I turn around, you're adding some sort of new benefit and way that can do that. So at what point, somebody out there might be thinking right now about, well, we're not big enough, but at what point does it make sense to either, you know, hire somebody like Sherry to do the screen, or go ahead and get a subscription themselves so that they can do it anytime they want?
I mean, I'm biased, but I like to think that every organization can benefit from some extra information to make their job a little bit easier. Whether it's, you know what, it doesn't have to be that you're logging in every day. It could be that you're logging in once a week, but as long as you're creating a profile and able to find some extra data about someone so that you go into that next donor meeting planned ahead of time and know what to ask for, know what they have a history of giving, that makes you informed, it makes your organization better, makes you look better to that potential donor. And then, yeah, there are times where, especially now, I'm seeing more common place where organizations are a little short on people, and places like Sharity and other consulting firms have had to step in and fill the void. So it's a little mix of both. It's really what you're comfortable with. Again, I'm a little biased in the fact that I'm going to push the software, but I love the fact that you're already using the software. So you're going to be biased in obviously offering your services. So
Right.
it's the best of both worlds. And as long as I sleep better at the end of the day, knowing that what I'm doing at IWAVE helps clothe and feed so many kids, you know, putting them through school. I've worked here a long time, and I completely love what we do here.
Well, and I think I that's why I love what I do too, is because I know if I can help a nonprofit be more successful in fundraising, that they're going to be able to do more of their work in the community, which is so always so needed. And there's always such an incredible demand, whether it's rescuing animals or rescuing people, or rescuing the environment. It's really so important. And you know, one of my number one rules for all of my clients is you never ever walk into a meeting with a donor where you're going to ask for money and you don't have 100% in your head the number you're going to ask for. And so having information and having this backed up with a lot of data is something that I think makes a lot of times it makes people feel more comfortable asking for that larger number, because they know that there's some science behind it.
No question. Agree 100%.
So if any last thoughts or I mean, this has been really great having you today. And I know that,
thank you.
Well, I know that there's a lot of probably people have a lot of other questions and they can reach out to you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me through the 1-800 number. You can reach me. I'm sure we'll share something. It's just jeremy.davies@iwave.com. And you can reach me through the website too. But and obviously you have my information. So we've been working together a while. So yeah, definitely look me up.
Fabulous. And I know that you know, it's always, now is the time, you know, don't wait, do it now. But I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of explain how a tool like this can be so important, especially to a nonprofit that doesn't have a lot of staff. And a lot of our research shows that most nonprofits have less than one full-time person doing fundraising. And so having tools like this can make all the difference in the world. So
Agreed. No, thanks for having me, Carol. Thanks for the invite. Much appreciated. Thanks for spreading the good word.